My parents gave my sister 80 KR to study in Paris and told me, "You don't deserve any help." My name is Daisy Coleman. I am 26 years old. I was the daughter who grew up being treated as invisible until I learned silence could speak louder than any apology. The candles flickered against crystal glass. My mother raised her wine and smiled. The smile was for the camera, maybe, or just for my sister. $80,000 for Leah's studies in Paris. The room broke into applause. It was a nice dinner party. They had invited neighbors and some of Dad's business partners. Everyone was happy for Leah. They should be. Paris is expensive. I sat there. I ate my dinner. I waited for the noise to go down. I waited for someone to look at me. I looked up and asked softly. My voice was quiet. It always was. What about me? The sound of my fork on the plate was louder than my question. Mom didn't blink. Her eyes were still fixed on Leah. She spoke without turning her head. Her voice was flat. It was just a statement. A fact. You don't deserve any help. The laughter froze. Forks clinked against plates. The air got heavy, thick like cream. I smiled. I nodded. I took a slow sip of water. I memorized the scene. I memorized the way the light hit the diamonds on Mom's hand. I memorized the smell of the fancy wine. I memorized the quiet. That was the last dinner I ever attended in that house. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment, where are you watching from? My name is Daisy Coleman, and I grew up being the background to someone else's story. That is the simplest way to say it. I was like the wallpaper. Nice enough, but nobody looked at me. Nobody remembered what color I was. They remembered the furniture. The furniture was Leah. Leah was always the main event. She was blonde. She was loud. She was artistic. She got the new laptop in high school. I got the 5-year-old hand-me-down. It was slow. It crashed all the time. I learned to fix it myself. I learned to work around the problems. That was my first lesson in life. Fix your own problems. Leah got the bigger bedroom. It had the window that looked over the garden. It was always full of sunshine. My room was in the front. It faced the street. It was small. It smelled like old dust and quiet. I didn't mind the quiet, not then. I liked to read there. I liked to be alone. I didn't know then that I wasn't choosing to be alone. I didn't know I was being placed there. Leah got the good grades framed on the wall. Her report cards were perfect. They had gold stars. They were in the hallway where everyone could see them. When I got A's, my parents said, "That's good. Keep it up." They never framed my report cards. Once I asked Dad why. He said, "You're practical, Daisy. Practical results don't need a frame. They just are." He thought it was a compliment. It felt like a dismissal. It felt like he was saying my success was boring. I got silence. I got errands. I got the word practical disguised as praise. Leah was always performing. She was in school plays. She painted huge canvases. She talked about feelings. My parents loved feelings. They loved drama. It made them feel important. It made them feel like they were raising a sensitive artist. I liked math. I liked science. I liked things that had clear answers. I liked things that worked the way they were supposed to work. This was my problem, maybe. I was too clear. I was too quiet. There was no drama for them to enjoy. When I won the state science fair, I was 15. I had built a model of a solar-powered charging station. It took me 6 months. I was very proud. I brought home the big blue ribbon. Mom was on the phone in the kitchen. I stood there holding the ribbon. It felt heavy. She finished her call. She looked at the ribbon. "That's nice, Daisy." She picked up a dirty dish. But Leah's essay made her teacher cry. "Did you hear? Her teacher said she has a soul for literature." She didn't ask me how I did it. She didn't ask me how the competition went. She didn't say, "I'm proud of your work, Daisy." She said my success was nice. Then she talked about Leah's tears. Love in our house was measured in attention, and I never made the cut. I remember the day Leah got her college acceptance letter from NYU. My parents held a small party just for that. Champagne was popped. Pictures were taken. Leah cried happy tears. My parents looked at her with shining eyes. They talked about her future. They talked about her genius. I was already in college. I was going to the state university, just an hour away. I had gotten a partial scholarship. My parents said, "That's sensible." "You're sensible, Daisy." They said I should stay close to home. They said I should be the one who could come back on the weekends to help out. Leah went to New York. I stayed close. My college choice was not a celebration. It was a strategic family decision. I was the reliable one. I was the one who could be counted on to not need too much. I needed a car for college. Leah got a new small sedan before she moved to New York. It was red. It was fast. When I asked for a car, Dad said, "Take the bus, Daisy. You're only an hour away. The bus is good for you. It teaches you patience." He said I needed to build character. He did not say Leah needed to build character. I took the bus for 2 years. I studied on the bus. I ate cold sandwiches on the bus. I learned how to move through the world without expecting help. The bus became my private lesson in self-reliance. When Leah visited, she talked about New York parties. She talked about gallery openings. She talked about struggling in an artistic way. My parents listened for hours. They sighed sadly about her struggle. They gave her extra money. They told her she was brave. I talked about my engineering classes. I talked about coding. I talked about my perfect GPA. My parents nodded. Mom would then say, "Did you remember to take the trash out, Daisy? It's your week." My work was just the background noise to the rest of the family's life. It wasn't that they were mean. It wasn't loud abuse. It was worse. It was neglect built on comparison. It was the slow, steady knowledge that I was the lesser project. I was the proof that they could not have 2 stars. So they chose one. They chose Leah, and I was left to fade. I remember once I was sick, really sick. I had a high fever. I called home from my dorm room. Mom answered. I could hear Leah practicing her guitar in the background. I said, "Mom, I feel really bad. I think I need to go to the doctor." She paused. "Oh, honey, that's rough. Can you walk? Leah has a big audition tomorrow. I can't leave her. We need to make sure she rests." She told me to take some Tylenol. She told me to call a friend. She did not drive the hour to come see me. My roommate took me to the urgent care clinic. I had the flu. I was there alone. When I got better, I never told my parents. I realized then that my pain was inconvenient to their main project, Leah's life. This pattern went on for years. Every holiday, every phone call, every family photo. Leah was in the center, bright and demanding. I was on the edge, blending into the wall. I learned to smile. I learned to nod. I learned to take care of myself. This was the only survival skill I had. I started to stop talking about my own life. It was easier. If I didn't tell them about my successes, they couldn't turn them into something smaller. If I didn't tell them about my problems, they couldn't tell me to fix them myself. My internal life grew very rich. My outside life grew very quiet. I was building a fort, a life that only I knew about. It was the only place I felt safe. I had just turned 21. Leah turned 23 the same year. They had a huge party for Leah. She was back from New York for the summer. It was a welcome home Leah party. They served expensive wine. Dad gave a speech about her talent. My 21st birthday was a Tuesday. I got a card in the mail from them. It had $20 inside. Mom called me later. She said, "Happy birthday, Daisy. We'll celebrate when Leah leaves again. We're too busy now." I went to a cheap movie alone. I bought myself a small cake. I sang happy birthday to myself in my dorm room. It was not sad. It was just true. It was just the reality of my life. I was not important enough for them to stop their routine. This was the world I lived in. It was a world where I was loved, perhaps, but only as a backup dancer. I was there, but my presence was not required. My needs were not important. My dreams were not worth an investment. I kept all this inside. I kept it quiet. I kept it safe. I used the quiet as fuel. I used the neglect as a roadmap. I knew exactly what I was not getting, and I decided I would get it for myself. So when the Paris dinner came, I was not surprised. I was just ready. I was not shocked by the number. $80,000. That was a house down payment. That was a serious investment. It was serious proof of who they valued. I had been out of college for 2 years by then. I was working full-time for a tech company. I was doing well. I had money saved. But I was still Daisy, the one they ignored. And Leah was still Leah, the one they supported. The dinner was the end of a long, slow process. It was the moment the door finally clicked shut. It was the end of my childhood hope. It's hard to explain the feeling. It was not anger. It was not tears. It was a deep, quiet settling. Like dust settling after a loud noise. Everything was suddenly very clear. When Mom told me, "You don't deserve any help," she was telling the truth of their feelings. She was not lying. She was being perfectly honest. That is why it hurt so much. It was the honest truth of my place in their world. I smiled. I nodded. I finished my water. And I waited for the next step. The next step was going to be mine. It was not going to be theirs. That night wasn't new. It was just final. It was the closing chapter on a book I had been forced to read for 24 years. The dining room was beautiful. They had spent a lot of money on the meal. The table was long. The silver was polished. Everything looked perfect. Everything was a lie. Leah was talking about the Sorbonne. She was practicing her French accent. She was making wide gestures with her hands. Her engagement ring was new. It sparkled under the chandelier. She was the star. She was always the star. I listened. I watched my parents watching her. Their faces were soft. They looked proud. They looked like they had won something. They had won a beautiful daughter going to Paris. Dad cleared his throat between bites of steak. He used his business voice. The loud, important one. We invest where it brings returns. Leah's education is worth it. Her art is important. This investment will pay off. He used the word invest. He did not use the word love. He did not use the word support. He used the word return. That was another key piece of information. They saw their children as investments. I just wasn't a good one. The moment came. It was the moment I had planned. It was a small test. I wanted to see if the rules had changed. Just a little. I knew they hadn't, but I had to ask. For my own peace, I put down my knife. I looked at my dad. My voice was calm, very steady. Dad, I need to cover my dorm deposit for my post-grad course. It's a specialized certification. It costs $2,000. I held my breath. $2,000 is nothing compared to $80,000. It was a tiny number. It was a small request. It was a gesture. Mom laughed softly. It was a little puff of air. It was a sound of amusement. Not cruelty. Worse, amusement. Oh, Daisy, you're always so last minute. She took a drink of wine. She wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin. You made your own choices, Daisy. You chose to go straight into tech. You chose to work. We're not wasting more money on a certificate. You already have a job. You're fine. She used the word wasting. She did not say spending. She said wasting. The two words hit me at the same time. Invest for Leah, wasting for me? My heart did not speed up. My hands did not shake. I just felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was the feeling of a truth being confirmed. A final, absolute truth. The chandelier hummed above us. The noise was very loud in the quiet room. I looked at my mother. I looked at my father. I looked at Leah, who was busy fixing her necklace. She didn't look up. She didn't defend me. She never did. I stood up. I did not scrape my chair. I stood up slowly. I put my napkin neatly on the table. I said one thing before leaving. I made sure my voice was clear. I made sure it was just loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't worry. You'll never have to waste anything on me again. I did not wait for a response. I did not look back. I did not want to see their faces. I did not want to see the confusion or the anger or the fake sadness. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the kitchen. The kitchen smelled like the roast they had made. It smelled like my childhood. It smelled like food I had cooked for them. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed my small backpack. I opened the front door. I walked out into the Seattle rain. The rain was cold. It was hard. It was clean. It washed everything away. I walked for a long time. I just walked. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew where I was coming from. I was coming from a place where I was not valued. I reached the main street. I found a bus stop. I sat on the bench. My clothes were soaked. I didn't care. My phone rang. It was Dad. I looked at the screen. I let it ring. I did not answer. It rang again. It was Mom. I let it ring. I did not answer. They were calling because I walked out. They were calling because I was being disruptive. They were not calling because they were worried about me. They were worried about the scene I had made. I watched the bus lights come closer. The bus stopped. I got on. I paid the fare. I sat in the back. I rode the bus for hours. I rode it until the rain stopped. I rode it until the city became unfamiliar. I did not go back. I never went back to that house again. I stayed on the bus until I got to Capitol Hill. I chose that neighborhood because it was busy. It was young. It was far from the quiet, wealthy neighborhood where I grew up. I checked my bank account. I had enough saved for 2 months' rent. I had been saving every penny since I started working. I had always known I would need an exit fund. I found a cheap motel room for the night. The sheets smelled like bleach. The air conditioner hummed loudly. It was the loudest sound I had heard all day. It was not the silent hum of the chandelier. It was honest noise. I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. I did not cry. Crying was a waste of energy. I was done wasting things. I realized something important. When my mother said, "You don't deserve any help," she was giving me a gift. She was freeing me. She was telling me officially that I was on my own. I did not have to pretend anymore. I did not have to wait for their approval. I did not have to ask for anything ever again. The next morning, I did not call them. They did not call me again. They probably assumed I was being dramatic and would show up eventually. They always underestimated me. I packed the few things I had brought. I walked the streets of Capitol Hill. I looked for a room to rent. I needed something cheap. I needed something close to the bus line. I found a sign in the window of a dusty coffee shop. Room for rent above. I walked up the creaky stairs. The landlord was a kind old man. He only asked for a small deposit. He didn't ask for references. He didn't ask for much. He just asked if I liked the smell of coffee. I love the smell of coffee, I said. The room was small. It had one window that looked out over the alley. It had a tiny kitchen corner. It was mine. I moved my few possessions in. My clothes. My old laptop. My textbooks. That was all I had. That was all I needed. I sent a short text to Leah. I moved out. "Don't worry about me," she texted back an hour later. "OMG, Daisy. Drama much?" "Call Mom." "It's not a big deal." I didn't text back. Leah called it drama. I called it survival. The end of the story was not sad. It was a new beginning. I closed the door of that tiny room. I listened to the sounds of the city. I was alone. I was poor, but I was finally truly free of the background noise. I was free of the expectation that I would be less than Leah. I was free to be just Daisy, the one who fixed her own problems, the one who didn't need a frame. I rented the room above the coffee shop in Capitol Hill. It smelled like burnt espresso and wet books. Those smells became the smell of my new life. They were sharp. They were real. They were not the smell of expensive linen and roast beef. They were the smell of work. My first few weeks were hard. I worked 2 jobs. By day, I worked at a computer repair shop. I fixed routers. I fixed broken screens. I fixed things people threw away. I was good at it. I was quiet. I was efficient. I got extra tips. I saved every dollar. The shop was loud. The music was bad. The customers were often angry. I didn't let the noise touch me. I focused on the problem in front of me. I focused on the code. I focused on the wires. It was easier than focusing on my family. I worked from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I ate a cheap dinner. Rice and beans, maybe a piece of fruit. By night, I coded. I coded under the hum of a desk lamp that flickered like a heartbeat. The lamp was old. The bulb was weak. It was a perfect match for my mood. I was old. I was weak. But I was still working. I was finishing my post-grad certification in advanced data analytics. I did the classes online. I worked while others slept. I worked while others were out drinking. I worked while Leah was packing her designer luggage for Paris. I focused on the logic gates. I focused on the clean structure of the programming language. Code was better than family. Code did not lie. Code did not betray. If you did the right thing, the code worked. If the code did not work, it was my fault. I liked that control. I liked the clear cause and effect. I didn't talk to anyone about my family. When my landlord asked, I said they lived far away. When my coworkers asked, I just smiled and changed the subject. The silence was a shield. The silence was a comfort. Every line of code became a small rebellion. Every line was a step away from them. Every line was a word I was not speaking. I was speaking to the computer now. And the computer understood me. I was building a future. The future was not about art. The future was not about being loved. The future was about being unbreakable. The future was about having so much money that no one could ever tell me I didn't deserve help again. I would not need their help. I would not need anyone's help. I had a small notebook. I kept track of my savings. I wrote down the date I left home, August 14th. I made a goal. I would save $10,000 in 1 year. It seemed impossible, but I looked at that number every morning. It was my North Star. I stopped buying coffee at the shop downstairs. I bought a cheap coffee maker. I drank my coffee black. I cooked all my own food. I walked everywhere. I did not take a single cab. I did not buy one new piece of clothing. I was cheap. I was focused. I was angry. I used the anger to work harder. When I missed my family, the feeling was like a ghost. It was quick. It was sharp. And then it was gone. I replaced the ghost with a new project. I replaced the sadness with a new problem to solve. I knew my parents were not bad people. They were just focused. They were just people who chose one thing over another. And I was the thing they chose not to focus on. That knowledge was the hardest part. It wasn't hate. It was a lack of importance. Sometimes I saw pictures of Leah on social media. She was in Paris. She was in front of the Eiffel Tower. She was smiling. She looked happy. My parents were commenting, so proud. "You deserve this, sweetie." I looked at the photos. I felt nothing. The feeling was gone. It was like looking at a stranger's vacation photos. I was disconnected. I was free. I worked at the repair shop for 10 months. I hit my $10,000 goal. I did it 3 months early. The feeling was pure. It was not joy. It was proof. Proof that I could do what I said I would do. Proof that my efforts were not wasted. I started to focus more on my own project. The small private project. The app I had the idea during my tech course. I saw how much time small businesses wasted on tracking their deliveries. The system was old. It was slow. I thought I can fix that. I called it TrailSync. It was a simple, clean interface. It gave small businesses real-time GPS tracking for their local deliveries. It was meant for bakeries, florists, and small shops. It was designed to be easy to use. I worked on it for another 6 months. I did not tell anyone. It was my secret. It was my weapon. I used the money I saved to pay for the server costs. I paid for a cheap lawyer to file the initial paperwork. I was very careful. I did everything by the book. I was not leaving anything to chance. Every saved dollar became a brick in a life I was building from nothing. I was the architect. I was the builder. I was the foundation. I was 25 years old. Leah was still in Paris. She was still studying. She was still sending updates to my parents about her struggles. My parents were sending her money. I was in my tiny room. The light was flickering. The espresso smell was strong. I hit the final code button. The app was done. It was clean. It was ready. I didn't have a plan for launch. I just had the product. I needed to show it to someone. I went to a local tech meetup. I wore my best plain black shirt. I stood in the corner. I did not talk to anyone. I waited. A man in a nice suit walked by. He was an investor. I knew who he was. He was famous for finding good projects. He saw me looking at my laptop. He walked over. "What are you working on?" he asked. His voice was tired. I showed him TrailSync. I did not talk about the money. I did not talk about the business plan. I just showed him the code. I showed him how it worked. I showed him how clean it was. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. He just scrolled. He just clicked. He just looked. Then he looked up at me. He looked surprised. "This is simple. This is smart. Who wrote this?" "I did," I said. My voice was simple. He asked me the business questions. I answered them all. I had planned them all. I had written them down in my small notebook. I had every detail correct. He gave me his card. It was thick. It was heavy. "Call me tomorrow," he said. "I think you just found the next big thing." I went back to my room. I did not celebrate. I did not jump. I just looked at the business card. It was proof. I had done it. Silence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was structure. It had built me. I created an app called TrailSync, a delivery tracker for small businesses. It started as a school project, a way to pass the time. It became the key to my freedom. The day after the tech meetup, I called the investor. His name was Mr. Harrison. He was sharp. He was direct. I liked that. He didn't waste time. He asked me what I wanted. "I want a contract," I said. "I want to retain control of the product. I want a fair valuation." I did not act needy. I did not act grateful. I acted like a professional. I acted like someone who knew her worth. This was easy because my family had spent 2 decades telling me I had no worth. I was ready to prove them wrong. He liked my attitude. He said so. "You're tough, Daisy. I like tough." We talked for 2 hours. He told me the market was huge. He told me the idea was clean. He told me I was going to be successful. I was 25. I signed the first agreement in a fancy office downtown. The paper was thick. The pen was heavy. Mr. Harrison called it the next big thing. He gave me seed money. Not $2,000 for a deposit. He gave me $200,000. It was the largest number I had ever seen with my name on it. I did not spend it on a new apartment. I did not spend it on a new car. I spent it on lawyers. I spent it on better servers. I spent it on a small team of engineers I hired to help me scale. I worked with the best. I worked with the quiet ones, the ones who just wanted to code. Within months, I was working 16-hour days. Half caffeine, half determination. I moved my operation out of the coffee shop room and into a small, windowless office space. It was not fancy, but it was private. I was everywhere. I was talking to clients. I was coding. I was fixing problems. I was building a company. My life was simple. Work, sleep, repeat. I had no time for social media. I had no time for family. That was the point. My first contract was with a major regional bakery chain. They needed a better way to track their morning deliveries. TrailSync was perfect. When my first contract hit 6 figures, the money went into my business account. I looked at the number. I looked at the commas. It was real. It was mine. I did not tell anyone. I did not tell Mr. Harrison. I did not tell my small team. I just smiled. It was a very small smile, a private smile. I looked at my desk. My old coffee maker was still there. It was cheap. It was slow. I went to a store. I bought a better coffee machine. It was fast. It was silver. It was quiet. It made good coffee. I put the old coffee maker in the closet. I put the new one on the desk. Then I went back to work. I went back to coding. I went back to building. Because when you've been ignored long enough, success feels sacred. It is not something you share. It is something you protect. It is your proof. I learned that success is not loud. Success is quiet confidence. Success is the knowledge that you can do it again. You can do it better. I did not need their applause. I did not need their acknowledgement. I only needed the silence to continue working. The silence was the sound of my life, finally making sense. I knew that the next phase was coming. I knew that the money would get bigger. I knew the company would get famous. I knew that one day they would hear my name, but I was not doing it for them. I was not doing it to hurt them. I was doing it for Daisy, the girl who sat on a bus, cold and alone, knowing she would never get a call from home. The girl who was told she was not worth $2,000. I closed my laptop. The office was dark. I looked at the new coffee machine. I looked at the desk lamp, which was now bright and steady. No more flickering. I packed my bag. I was going home to my tiny room above the coffee shop. I kept that room for another year. It reminded me of where I came from. It kept me focused. I was independent. I was strong. I was a success story that had been written entirely without an editor. And that was the best part of all. I did not need their investment. I was my own return. The rise they never saw coming. 3 years passed quickly. They were years of pure, focused work. I didn't take vacations. I didn't spend time on friends. My life was the company. The company was TrailSync. TrailSync became one of the fastest growing logistics startups in the Pacific Northwest. It was no longer just an app for local bakeries. It was now used by mid-size retailers. They needed better tracking. They needed my system. I gave it to them. The business grew in a steady, quiet way. I never sought the spotlight. I didn't want the noise. I just wanted the results. I wanted the proof. By age 26, I was very rich. It happened slowly, then all at once. The first major round of funding was huge. It was more money than my parents had ever earned combined. I looked at the numbers on the screen. It was overwhelming. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of black coffee. The money didn't change my routine. It didn't change me. I moved out of the room above the coffee shop. I didn't leave Capitol Hill. I just moved a few miles away. I needed a house, not an apartment. I needed space. I bought a $5 million home overlooking Lake Union. It was all glass and concrete. It was modern. It was silent. It was the opposite of the house I grew up in. That house was loud with opinions. This house was silent with success. I paid cash. I enjoyed that part. Writing the check for the full amount. No debt, no reliance. Just the simple exchange of my work for this home. I had a giant window in my office. I could see the seaplanes landing on the water. I could see the city shining at night. It was a view I had earned. I kept the house very minimal. I didn't fill it with things. I had only the essentials. I had a good bed. I had good coffee. I had a desk with a powerful computer. I bought only one piece of decor. It was the most important thing in the house. I hung one thing on the wall, a framed bus pass from my first job. It was old and creased. It was a simple plastic card. Under it I wrote in tiny letters, "Built from silence." I looked at that bus pass every day. It was a reminder. It was the only memory of my past I allowed in my new life. My family knew nothing. They were ghosts. I knew Leah was back from Paris. She had a master's degree in fine art. She opened a small gallery downtown. I saw it once when I was driving. It looked small and empty. My parents were still helping her. I knew this because once I saw a bank transfer from my mother to Leah for gallery supplies. It was $1,500. They were still investing. I was everywhere in the Seattle tech world, but I was also invisible. I used my middle name on most of the business documents. I kept my social media private and sparse. Tech magazines wrote features about the quiet founder from Seattle. They talked about the product. They talked about the logic. They talked about the growth. They rarely talked about me. When they did, they used a photo of me from a distance. I preferred it that way. The articles never mentioned my family name. They never connected me to the Coleman family. And that was perfect. I was Daisy. Not Daisy, Leah's sister. Not Daisy, the sensible daughter. Just Daisy, the founder. I had a moment of worry once. A reporter called my old university. They were writing a long profile. I was scared they would call my parents. They did call my parents. My father answered the reporter. The reporter asked about my time at the state school. He asked about my childhood. My father told the reporter, "Daisy, oh, she was always very independent. She never needed much from us. She was focused on her practical studies. We're very proud of Leah, of course, the artist. Daisy just did her own thing." The reporter wrote the quote. He used the quote to talk about my self-reliance. When I read it, I felt that cold, settling feeling again. He still didn't see me. He still saw a practicality that required no investment. He told the world I was invisible. And he didn't even know he was doing it. He thought he was giving a normal quote. I read the article and smiled. He had just given me a great line for my next funding pitch. The founder who built this company without a single dollar of family support. The invisibility was the final layer of my armor. They couldn't hurt what they couldn't see. And they couldn't see me because they were too busy looking at Leah. One afternoon, Mr. Harrison came to my office. He was excited. He was always excited. "Daisy, we need a bigger marketing push. People need to know who you are. This is a great story." The silent founder. The quiet power? I shook my head. No, thank you. The product is the story. The results are the story. He leaned forward. You can't hide forever. You own this town now. You own this market. You're worth $250 million, Daisy. People need to see the face. I took a deep breath. Mr. Harrison, I don't want the noise. I don't want the attention. I don't want the drama. He understood. He was an old wise man. He knew family secrets existed everywhere. I compromised. I agreed to one public event a year. It would be a sponsored event. It would be about education and technology. It would be about giving back. Not about me. I wanted the event to be a shield. I wanted it to be a way to control the narrative. I wanted to show the world that my worth was not just the money. It was the purpose behind the money. I decided to start a scholarship fund. It was called the Unseen Investment Fund. The goal was to fund projects by young women who were told their work was nice, but not important. The first scholarship would be for $80,000. It was the only number I considered. It was the number that started everything. I was standing on my deck one evening. The city lights were on the water. The air was clean. I had everything I needed. I had peace. I had quiet. I was 26. I was a success. I was happy, but happiness felt different than I thought it would. It was not loud. It was not a party. It was a quiet certainty. It was the knowledge that if everything disappeared tomorrow, I could build it again. Because I built it once from nothing. From the bus pass. From the silence. And that was a success they would never understand. They only understood the noise of Leah's applause. They never heard the quiet power of my work. They never saw the rise coming because they were never looking in my direction. It happened one Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen. I was making a slow, expensive cup of coffee. I had time now. I had space. I enjoyed the simple rituals. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it. I usually did. But something made me pick it up. Maybe it was the quiet of the morning. I answered. Hello? A voice trembled on the other end. It was soft. It was unfamiliar, but I knew it. It had been years since I heard it without a crowd around it. Daisy, it's Leah. My heart did not jump. It did not sink. It just stayed still, like a stopped clock. Hello, Leah, I said. My voice was level. I did not ask how she was. I did not ask why she was calling. She didn't waste time. She was shaking. I could hear it in her breath. I just drove past Medina. I was visiting a friend. I saw a house. It was huge, modern. I slowed down. Your name's on the gate. Is that your house? There was a silence on the line. I looked out the massive kitchen window at the lake. The water was calm, yes, I said. Just one word, simple, direct. The line went quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, shallow, quick. Then she spoke again. Her voice was small. Not the loud voice I remembered. I thought you were still in the tiny apartment. I thought you were just a mid-level coder. Dad said you were sensible and doing fine. I waited. I let her process the information. It was not my job to help her. It was not my job to explain myself. The house is $5 million, Daisy, she whispered. It was the money that shocked her, not the success, not the work. The number. That's what they cost in Medina, I replied. Then click. She hung up the phone. She couldn't handle the truth. She had always been the one with the big numbers, the big dreams, the big checks. Now I was the one with the biggest number of all. I put my phone down. I finished making my coffee. I sat down at my table. I felt nothing. No victory. No satisfaction. Just the simple truth of the situation. Leah was shocked. Leah's reality was broken. An hour later, the messages started. Not just one, a flood. A waterfall of texts and emails. They started with Leah. Laya. Text. Daisy, why didn't you tell us? How did you do this? We're so confused. Mom is crying, I didn't reply. Leah was always confused when things didn't go her way. Then came the messages from my parents. They were structured. They were carefully worded. They were manipulative. Mom, text. We're still family. We always loved you. We always knew you were smart. Dad, email, formal subject line regarding your success. We are proud. We wish you had shared this journey with us. Family should support family. This is huge, Daisy. They were proud of the result, not the work. They were proud of the money, not the journey. I deleted the texts. I did not delete the email. I read it again, then came the second wave. The needy wave. The wave that showed their real intention. Mom, text. Leah's having a baby. It's a girl. You should be part of this. She needs an aunt. We need you, honey. Dad, text. Leah is struggling with the gallery. She needs a loan. We're stretched thin. You have the ability to help. They didn't want me. They wanted access. They wanted my success to fix their problems. They wanted my fortune to prop up their favorite investment, Leah. I looked at the messages. My hands were perfectly steady. I was not angry. I was just observing the pattern. The pattern never changed. I wrote an email to my dad. It was a draft. I did not send it. I just needed to write the words. You said Leah's education was an investment that would bring returns. My investment in my own silence and my own work is bringing a return now. You taught me the value of money. You taught me that you invest where it brings returns. I learned the lesson well. I am not an ATM. I am not a backup plan. I am not the fixer for Leah's lack of success. I deleted the draft. It was too much noise. They did not deserve an explanation. They deserved silence. I sat there for the rest of the morning. I didn't work. I just thought, why did they need me now? Because my success was too big to ignore. My success was a noise in their quiet, comfortable world. It forced them to see me. They had built a story for themselves. Leah, the genius artist. Daisy, the sensible coder who would stay close by and never need anything. My $5 million house broke their story. It was the plot twist they didn't write. The emotional messages hurt the most. They tried to use the idea of family, the idea of a new baby. They tried to use guilt to draw me back in. They never once apologized. They never said, "We are sorry we dismissed you." They never said, "We are sorry we didn't support you." They only said, "We are family, and we are proud." Their pride was a tool. It was a way to open the door. I knew that if I responded now, I would fall back into the old pattern. I would be Daisy, the reliable one coming home to fix things. I could not do that. I could not lose the freedom I had built. I put my phone on silent. I walked out onto the deck. I stood there looking at the water. I had worked for years to get this peace. I would not give it up for a text message. They were still family. That part was true. But they were the kind of family you keep at a safe distance. The kind of family you observe, not the kind you trust. I needed to send a clear message. Not a text message. Not a phone call. I needed to send a boundary. A strong final boundary. I needed to show them that the rules had changed. I was not the victim anymore. I was the one who controlled the conversation. The conversation would be silent for now. 3 days later, the messages stopped. The texts went quiet. I knew they were planning their next move. They were my parents. They were always strategic, especially when it came to money. I was expecting a lawyer's letter. I was expecting a formal request. I was ready for a fight. What arrived was much worse. It was a letter. Cream paper. Expensive ink. It was Mom's handwriting. It was an antique letter. It was meant to feel personal. It was meant to feel innocent. It was meant to feel like a memory. I opened it slowly. I sat at my desk and read it. It started with a memory. A fake memory. Dearest Daisy, I remember when you were 7 and you knitted me a small, ugly scarf. I kept it for years. You always had a good heart. I never knitted an ugly scarf. I barely knew how to knit. Leah knitted things. I built things. This was the first lie. She continued, talking about her life, about the simple things, about how hard it was now that they were getting older. We've struggled lately. The market is tight. Dad's business is slow. The roof needs repair. It's an old house, Daisy, full of history. Family supports each other. It's important to look after the things that matter. This was the hook. The plea for the house. The plea for the history. The plea for the family they had always ignored. She was not asking for a loan. She was asking for me to save their life. The life they had chosen over mine. Then came the closing line. The line that was designed to cut me. The line that was designed to make me feel small. You're not a cold person, Daisy. You have a good heart. She was telling me that if I didn't help, I was cold. She was using the threat of a character flaw. She was using judgment. I folded the letter once. I held it in my hand. It was soft paper. It felt fake. I stood up. I walked to the trash can. It was a tall, modern can with a silent lid. I dropped the letter in the trash. I listened for the soft thud. It was the sound of a memory being deleted. I walked back to my computer. I opened my email. I did not use my personal account. I used my business account. It was professional. It was distant. I wrote back a single email. The subject line was, Re-family. The body was short. It was simple. It was direct. You're right. I'm not cold. Just done. I did not sign it with Love, Daisy. I did not sign it with Daisy. I just sent it. I hit the button. It was the cleanest thing I had ever done. It was the last word they would get from me in private. That night, the rain on the glass sounded different. It was a hard rain. It was the typical heavy Seattle rain, but it sounded different. Less like sadness, more like freedom. I sat in my living room. I watched the water run down the glass wall. I thought about their reaction. I thought about the fury, the confusion, the betrayal they would feel. They would feel betrayed because they expected me to rescue them. They had built a perfect story where they were the generous parents and Leah was the talented daughter. In that story, I was the quiet one who would always be there to clean up their messes. They expected me to play my role. I was refusing. My phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I did not answer. It rang again. And again. They were trying to call me through different lines. They were desperate. I let the sound die. I muted the phone. I realized that their definition of family support was a one-way street. It was them supporting Leah, and me supporting them. I was not allowed to be supported. I was only allowed to be the support structure. I thought about the $80,000 for Paris. That was a choice. A celebration. They told me I didn't deserve a $2,000 deposit. That was also a choice. My success was not a lottery ticket for them. It was not a safety net. It was mine. It was the result of the pain they inflicted. It was the result of the lesson they taught me. Rely on no one. I needed to turn the page. I needed to move the conversation from private emails to public action. I had already planned this. It was time for the final act. The final quiet act of power. I called my chief of staff. Her name was Maria. She was direct. She was smart. She knew I didn't like noise. Maria, I need to finalize the details for the education gala. I need a change in the speech. Yes, Daisy. What is the change? The donation. I want to make it public. And I want to be specific about the amount. And the purpose? Understood. Do you want to review the draft? No, I know what I'm going to say. Just make sure my parents are invited. Send them the most formal invitation possible. The one with the heavy cardstock. Maria paused. She knew my history. Are you sure, Daisy? Yes, I need them to hear the final statement. It is the only way to get true closure. It has to be public. Done, Maria said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the rain. I felt calm. The calm that comes after a long, hard decision. I was not seeking revenge. I was seeking balance. I was seeking truth. They would get to see the return on my investment. The investment in myself. A month later, the night of the Seattle Education Gala arrived. TrailSync sponsored the event. It was a huge deal. All the major players in Seattle business and technology were there. The room was grand. The chandeliers were brighter than the one in my parents' dining room. The room was full of noise. But it was a professional noise. A noise I now owned. I walked in wearing a navy suit. It was tailored. It was sharp. It was simple. I did not wear flashy jewelry. I did not wear bright colors. I was calm and certain. I was ready. I walked through the room. People stopped me. They wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to praise the company. They talked about the vision. I smiled. I nodded. I was polite. I was professional. I was Daisy, the founder. Then I saw them. They were standing near the corner, close to the buffet table. They looked a little uncomfortable. They looked out of place. They were wearing their best clothes, but they didn't have the ease of the other people. Mom was in pearls, the same pearls she wore the night of Leah's Paris dinner. Leah was there too. She was glowing with motherhood, wearing a formal dress. Dad was nearby, trying to look important, pretending pride. They saw me. Mom gasped softly. Dad nodded stiffly. Leah looked confused. She saw the way people were looking at me. She saw the respect. She saw the status. It was a higher status than she was used to. I walked toward them. I kept my face neutral. No anger, no fake warmth, just a professional, distant look. I stopped a few feet away. Hello, Mom. Dad. Leah. Mom stepped forward. Her voice was too loud. Too sweet. Daisy. Oh, my beautiful girl. We are so proud. We are so happy you invited us. Dad jumped in. This is a wonderful event. What you've done is amazing. We always knew you had the grit. Leah just watched me. Her eyes were big. She was calculating. She was trying to figure out how I got here. I did not hug them. I did not smile. I just looked at my mother. I'm glad you could make it, I said. It was important that you were here tonight. Before they could ask me for a loan, before they could start the emotional manipulation, I was called to the stage. The founder of TrailSync, Ms. Daisy Coleman. The applause was loud. I walked onto the stage. The lights were hot. I stood behind the podium. I took the microphone. I looked out at the room. I let the silence build. I saw my parents. They were looking at me. They thought I was going to give a boring tech speech. They thought I was going to acknowledge them. They were wrong. I started talking about the future of education. I talked about supporting young talent. I talked about investment. I spoke for 5 minutes. My voice was calm. It was strong. It was clear. I spoke about the need for honest support, the need for belief. Then I got to the end. I looked at my notes. I did not need them. I knew the words by heart. Tonight, TrailSync is launching the Unseen Investment Fund. The crowd clapped politely. I held up my hand for silence. This fund is dedicated to young women pursuing science, technology, and engineering who are told their practical work is not as important as others. The fund is for the forgotten daughters. I paused. I looked directly at my mother. She was standing next to my father. She was smiling a nervous, expectant smile. Tonight, I am making the first donation. I am donating $80,000. The gasps filled the room. $80,000 was a significant, specific number. I let the shock settle. I am donating $80,000 to fund 4 full scholarships. These scholarships are for young women told they don't deserve help. My mother's face froze. The smile vanished. Her eyes were wide. She understood the number. She understood the message. $80,000. Paris. Me. It was all connected. I finished my speech. My voice was still calm. My tone was still professional. You once called an artistic education an investment, and my practical choice a waste, Mom. So do I. I call this an investment in the future. An investment in the silent success that is being built right now. Applause thundered. The room erupted in noise. People loved the story. The quiet founder. The specific, meaningful donation. Her face was white. Dad turned pale. Leah looked down at the floor. They could not look at me. They were trapped. They were surrounded by people applauding the precise thing they had denied me. They were forced to witness the proof of their dismissal. I walked off the stage. I was calm. I was breathing normally. Mr. Harrison met me backstage. He was beaming. That was brilliant, Daisy. What a power move. It wasn't revenge, I said. It was balance. It was a public audit of their values. The debt is settled. I did not go back out to the main floor. I did not talk to my parents. I did not need to. I had said everything. The silence would begin now. A silence built on my own terms. I left the gala through the back door. I drove home alone. The victory was quiet. It was mine. I was sitting in my house. My glass house. The house I bought with the money they told me I wouldn't earn. Now, when it rains against the glass walls of my house, I listen. It doesn't sound like the cold, hard rain of the night I drove away on the bus. That night, the rain sounded like sadness and uncertainty. It sounds like proof. Proof that I made the right choice. Proof that their rejection was the fuel I needed. Proof that I built something stronger than their love. They once said I didn't deserve help. They were right, because what I needed wasn't help. It was distance. It was freedom. It was the space to grow outside of their shadow. I got that freedom. I got that distance. I got the $80,000 worth of closure, and I got a peace that can't be bought. My family still sends me emails sometimes. They are careful now. They are respectful of my boundaries. They ask about my work. They ask about Leah's baby. They don't ask for money anymore. They learned the lesson. I answer their emails once a month. I am polite. I am brief. I keep the distance. I keep the silence. It is not coldness. It is self-protection. If you've ever been told you weren't enough, remember this. Walking away isn't weakness. It's how strength learns to breathe. It is the first step toward building your own life, your own success, and your own silence.